So welcome to our session. The title is Oops, Something Went Wrong. So that means that if something goes wrong during the session, we're just covered, basically. So now you know what to expect. First of all, thank you to the sponsors. Microsoft, who is the biggest sponsor, who made it possible that we are all here. And then, of course, to the platinum sponsors, HSO, Proximo 3, Docs42, PwC, and AIS. Without them, this would not have been possible. I'm sure that all of you as well think it's great.
Right, of course. Without them, we wouldn't be here.
No, we wouldn't be here. I'm happy to be here in person. I know Tomasz is as well. We've done some, but it's still cool to have in-person events again. So that's the first thing that went wrong. Should we do a counter? So hi, I'm Carmen. I'm a Power Platform architect based in Belgium. There are still seats left. Please do find your seat, no worries. And I'm also a business applications MVP. Since the beginning of the year, I've been working with Microsoft 365 for 7 years and the Power Platform for coming up to 4 years. I'm a serial learner, which means that I like to learn a lot of new things, and then I like to share those learnings in the community. I'm an open sourcerist. I build an open source solution, Provision Genie, and I have a small dog that I love very much.
Right. My name is Tomasz Poszytek. I'm coming from Warsaw in Poland. I am as well the business applications MVP, although a bit longer. Now, I've been working with basically Microsoft technologies for really years before I started the community journey. But ever since I somehow touched Microsoft, it was always focused on processes. So I've been using with SharePoint Designer, with workflows in SharePoint Designer. Then I've been also working a lot with Nintex. And ever since Cloudflows, so the Power Automate or Microsoft Flow back then, went out from the preview, then I started adopting that platform, and I'm working today nearly only with cloud companies, with cloud customers, and doing the automation on, well, in cloud, and applications as well, a little bit. I'm as well a bit, well, social person, so I'm as well writing blog posts and recording videos. So if you're like interested in following me, then you can either go to one of these URLs or scan the QR code, and then you'll land on like a landing page with all these hyperlinks so that we can connect. So if you have questions during the session, simply raise up your hand. I'll do my best to reach out to you with the microphone so that you can repeat the question loud. But basically, don't hesitate to ask questions during the session while the context is known to everyone, because later then we'll just get lost, right? And something might go wrong. Agenda, yes.
The agenda. The agenda for today. So we have 5 topics that we want to cover. So first of all, we're going to talk about debugging. First, the basics, and then how we approach this. Afterwards, error handling, again, the basics and how we approach this. And then we're going to finish off looking at Azure Applications Insights.
Right. Just before I continue, I have to say I'm really thrilled and well, somehow surprised that we have so many of attendees today.
It's very nice.
Yeah, that really shows that we are all really starving for these social interactions in the community, which is really nice. So we just once again welcome to this session. I'm very happy. All right, so let's start with debugging. We'll start with some fun facts because, well, every one of us, possibly most of us here, we've been doing some applications, Cloudflows. Maybe you're even developers, so that debugging is nothing really new to you. And the goal is that no matter what you are doing, either applications in low-code, no-code approaches, or this full-stack development, it's always that the coding itself or creating itself is short, and then you got stuck on that thing that doesn't work, and you just can't find which thing doesn't work. So you're just doing this application, this flow for quite a short time, and then you're just stuck and trying to figure out why the hell it doesn't work, because it should work because you follow all the best practices. We copied some code from elsewhere or just did that code the best way you knew that it should be done, but it still doesn't work. So what's wrong? And in the end, you find yourself and your neighbors, your colleagues at work as some kind of a socially or mentally unstable person because you're just murmuring to yourself and just looking at a monitor, talking to yourself, trying to figure out what's wrong. And then finally, after many hours of this mentally unstable behavior, you shout, Eureka, and yes, you found that small piece, that small comma which is missing, or semicolon, or this whatever missing point in the expression that made the whole application just stuck, and in the end, well, you continue with new errors, actually. So it's just a never-ending process that after you find the first error, then you face new errors which will appear after saving the first one, right? So the debugging is just going on and going on. All right. So now
how
you
do we approach this?
Real content.
How do we approach debugging? Well, in our opinion, there are two sides to debugging. The first one is reading the results and understanding what is going wrong, because you can't fix something when you don't know where it's going wrong. And then secondly, it's modifying the logic to try and make it work, hopefully. Well, that's, of course, the goal. So these are the two steps that we need to take. And then looking at Power Apps and Power Automate, how we can do that, and I am going to switch to the demo, and I probably will need you to help me switch now, because this is his computer. If you show it me once, then I will probably be able to.
It's just a virtual desktop. Okay. But because it's
just the.
Oh, sorry.
That's the. It's probably on there, isn't it? See, second thing that is going wrong. See, Tomasz?
No, it's all fine.
Yes?
Yes, I made it. Or hopefully I've made it. Right, so just switch from my flows to your flows, to your apps.
Here we are. So when we're talking about debugging, and I need to switch the other screen, in Canvas apps, because that's what we're going to talk about, Canvas apps and cloud flows. In Canvas apps, debugging usually starts with this red cross that you see. It can also start with the result not being what you want it to be. But if you have this red cross, which is clearly indicating, hey, you have an error here, something is not right, how can you then, first of all, understand what went wrong? It's to go to the app monitor. I lost the cursor. There we are. To go to the app monitor, it's this stethoscope, which also has the app checker, which also has the red circle next to it. And then you can very easily find not only where the problem is occurring, but also some information about the issue. And here it's the issue is that the function patch has some invalid arguments. And if I then click here, oh,
I know it's fast.
Your mouse is very sensitive, yes. And here I can see that the location is in button save on select, so the on select property of my save button, which is currently hidden, because if I go to preview and I try to edit an account, the error is actually occurring on this save button to save the changes. So I can see that now it's clearly linked to the save button. So if I click the arrow next to the error message, I can also immediately go to where it's going wrong. So if I then select edit in the formula bar, I am now in my onSelect property of my save button, and I also see the red squiggly lines which indicate where it's going wrong. So here I just have the wrong argument. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to update the the country of my, or that's the functionality that I want to. I'm trying to update the country of my account, but I'm actually writing this to the category field, which is not a text field, it's a choice, which is why it's not working. And so if I change this, then I immediately will see that the error is gone. Oh, not gone, of course, because it's an address field, so I need the whole field name. There we go. And then the error is gone. So that is the first step in understanding where things go wrong. You use the app checker, and then you figure out where the mistake is happening. Another useful thing in trying to figure out where things are going wrong, and especially in modifying the logic, is being able to turn off certain parts of the functionality by commenting them out. So if I want to know, for example, when I click on my save button, I don't immediately want to close my pop-up, so I want to turn this functionality off, then I can comment out that part of the functionality with 2 slashes, forward slashes. If I want to block out multiple lines, then I can use block comments, which have this pattern. There is the asterisk. And then I can simply comment out multiple lines at once, which makes it easy if you have a long expression in your formula bar and you just want to see what one piece of that functionality is doing, you can comment out all the rest. Or if you have one thing that is broken and you want to see if everything else is still working, you can comment out the one broken thing and then try to fix it later on. So this is useful in trying to get to where things are going wrong. And then let me go back to the slides.
Oh, the slides are on the remote desktop, outside of the remote desktop. So.
Yeah. So that is how you can understand app behavior. It's the app checker, and then the app monitor is also useful. It gives you more extensive information, more deeper insight into what is going on. You see all of the calls that happen to a data source, etc. You see the responses, and there you can also see whether the queries that you're doing are correct, where in your action it's going wrong. So those are useful for understanding app behavior, and then modifying the logic. You can do that by working with different app controls and with the functionality, by making things visible. Very often, understanding where something is going wrong and then modifying it afterwards is about making things visible. So you can do that by, for example, having a label on your screen, which is just there for debugging, which displays the value of a certain variable, or a table if you want to check a list of records that you want to have. So those are things that I do all the time when I'm building applications and I just want to know the value of a certain thing. I want to know where things are going wrong. These are the ways that I try to make things visible. And then turning off part of the function, but with the commenting, like I showed. How do we do this in Power Automate?
Right. So in Cloudflows, we are basically doing all these things quite the same. So as many of you, hopefully, is working with Cloudflows, and I'm not the only one here doing that. I again need to close the presentation. So in Cloudflows, we as well have a feature that's called the flow checker. So again, like in Power Apps, there is a stethoscope with that red dot that actually shows us all the information about our Cloudflows. I mean, everything that is an error or a warning. So for example, if I, let me just maybe go to that easier flow. And here I add a small scope, a compose action, which obviously has to be filled with any kind of information. Then in Flow Checker, I will have immediately information, or I should have immediately information, that this action requires contents. Also, there are warnings, so information about what things you are having in your Cloudflows which are not errors, so they won't prevent the Cloudflow from running, but they might impact how the Cloudflow behaves. So like in this example, the flow is in a solution. However, it is still using the connections or connection references. The same thing like if you were having a flow which is being called from Power Apps, so it's being triggered by the Power Apps trigger, and then if you'd like to change anything in the logic of the Cloudflow, or for example, number of input variables, then you'll have again information, the warning information that by doing so, you might affect all these applications which are related or connected to this Cloudflow. So then again, be aware. So the flow checker is the first place that is going to tell you if there is anything wrong in your flow, whether it's an action that still requires to be configured, or a wrong connection that doesn't work, or even a wrong expression that doesn't work. So this is the first place. Now, the second thing you can use, or you can, well, utilize when the flow is not working, obviously is information about the flow run that delivers you the details about every action. Okay, this one was not triggered yet, but in flow run history, you have information about, again, that one is not right. Last check, right. So here you have the full run information about every action that was executed in the flow, and then if there was an error, then again the action that actually failed is going to be highlighted with this red exclamation mark icon, together with information about what actually went wrong, like what was the error that occurred on that action. So this is the information you can use to debug instances that run already and to try to find resolutions, fixes to the errors. Now, as we spoke about the beginning, in the beginning about debugging, is that usually after you fix the first error, others appear. So in case of power-ups, for example, as Carmen showed, you are able to comment out pieces of logic, pieces of the PowerFX expressions. Well, in Cloudflows, you are not able to comment out expressions because, well, still we are not having PowerFX support in Cloudflows. So when speaking about expressions, there is not much you can do, actually. You can try to remove the expression from the action and replace it with just the text that should be the outcome of the expression. However, the debugging of the expressions itself is really harsh, and there's no easy way to do that. So what I can recommend when speaking about the expressions themselves is to simply replace them with the outcomes, and then, or maybe just simplify them and try to break them down into many composed actions, and then perform each step of the expression operation per compose a step-by-step, well, like writing out outcomes of every modification or manipulation expression is doing. However, when you have a Cloudflow which is really large and you know that some action is failing and maybe the reason of the failure is like out of your control, you can't just make it to run properly, then you are not able to comment the action out. However, for most of the actions, you're able to like disable it. So once you navigate to the Cloudflow and to the action that is failing, then under the ellipsis icon, you have a functionality or a position in the menu that is called the static results. Now, the preview piece of the label is there for years, and I have no idea when it will be removed. However, the goal is that with static results, you're simply able to turn this action or to like turn it off, and so that it will always return either the correct or wrong information, or it will just return the information you want. So in case you would like this action to always return the data that it should return if it runs successfully, then you simply need to provide the outcome status code. You can then as well provide headers, and what you can do as well is to provide body. Body. Yeah, somewhere here is the body. Yeah. So instead of just, for example, providing the header like content, let's just do this way. Okay, how the header should look like. Let's say it's JSON. So you can provide a header, and as well you're able to provide some outputs. So in case, like in this situation, there is an action that calls a Graph API endpoint, then what you could do is to simply navigate to documentation, see how the outcome of such an action should look like, and then copy-paste the example from the Microsoft Docs and paste it here. Well, I'm not going to do that because I will just waste some time on looking. But the point is, once I now save these static results, the action is now having this icon here. And if I test it now, you'll see that the action itself is just going to be, let's say, executed as if it was run successfully. Sorry, I just need to trigger it from the Postman. Right, so it's now running, and it hopefully soon is going to be completed. Right, your flow runs successfully, and this action, which is now set to use the static results, it as well runs successfully, showing that body value that I provided. Okay, I just messed up something with headers, but the goal is that the whole flow run. So like the other thing you could do, if your action is failing, you can as well, or maybe some piece of logic is failing, but you still would like to test the rest of your Cloudflow, is to use not only the static results, but as well to use a thing that is called the parallel branch, for example. So in here, you will be able to put some pieces of the logic in the branch that should be executed successfully. For example, like moving some of these actions from the left side. Okay, this one action depends on that one, but let's assume that we had some kind of a logic here below, so I could be able to simply provide actions in here, plus to use an action that is called a terminate on the other branch that is still filing and you don't want it to be executed. So that, well, you can say that this branch is going to be succeeded or it won't be executed, and then the workflow will just go and execute actions in the other branch. So this way you're as well able to like cut off some of the logic from the Cloudflow that you don't want to execute, and then focus on the parts that you still need to work on. So this is what we can do, speaking about the debugging in Cloudflows. There is much more we can do as well in desktop flows, so in RPA, but we are not going to talk about RPA, as this is a topic in itself. It's a lot to do. All right, now switching to you, I just need to turn off the logic, the static results, because I will need the action working. Does any of you have any questions to this part of the presentation? Right.
Yeah. You will run up with the microphone or not? Okay.
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 That static results thing, when you're at the workflow view and you see that there are components that have got that set.
Yes, because
You could go with that live and have that.
right. So yes, you can, because that action, that icon actually that shows this action has static results turned on, it is always here. So
I was thinking more at the higher level. So the workflow overview page says, hey, you've got a static result being returned here, and you might want to go and switch them off before you go live. I know it's a governance thing, but it would just be nice, I think.
right. So basically, if you haven't heard, the question was if there is any information on like the workflow instance level that this specific instance was using static results instead of live results. So no. The only information that is using static results is this specific action that does it, and this is that laboratory cone, and that's the only icon and information that there is static results on in that Cloudflow. But there is no information on the level of the instance.
Thanks.
Oh wow! Why are you sitting so far away? Yes, please.
When you export, does it keep the static data?
All right.
When you re-import it,
So the question is, if I export the Cloudflow with the static results on, is its configuration saved? Yes, it is. So it will be exported with that status, with all those configurations in actions that was present at the moment of export. So then it will be, again, after import, it will be still running the static results. So just to summarize, when speaking about debugging in Cloud Flows, what you can do is to use the flow checker to get information about the configuration issues that you have in your flow, or to use the run history to find out which flow failed, and as well to use error details of that run instances to find out which action failed. And then speaking about the actions or the tools that you can use to debug, I haven't mentioned that one. So you can replace the trigger in your Cloudflow, which might be failing to the manual one, so that you are able to trigger your Cloudflow just manually when you want it. Then obviously, once you're done with changes, you can resubmit the flow, so it will be resubmitted with the same data as it was submitted in the first place when it failed. Plus, you can use this terminate action, static results, and run after, which could be as well used to cut out pieces of the logic from the whole flow logic. I will be talking about the run after as well about in the error handling section. So sorry not showing you this right now, but I promise I will. All right. Off to you.
Okay, and then after debugging, because debugging is again the first step in the application development process or the flow development process, because there you figure out all of the errors that happen when you're coding, when you're basically building it the wrong way. But then afterwards, when your app is running or your flow is running, still errors can occur because, for example, if you are contacting a database and you're not getting any results back, then you might want to handle that. You might want to handle that error. Or when your user gives you the wrong input, you also want to be able to deal with that so that it doesn't just break and then it's like, yeah, this is not going to work ever because it wasn't built for that. You don't want to give your users this message. Sorry, I can't handle this. I wasn't designed to do it, and now you figure it out. You probably will have to start all over again. That's not something that you want to tell your users. You want to be able to help them further. Even if they do something wrong, you want to be smart enough to tackle that and to foresee that so that when they do this, and it's not an if, it's a when, because users, you want to be able to deal with that.
Although it's still better to display an error message instead of displaying nothing and just displaying the loading icon, which can be displayed for years, right?
Yeah. But displaying an error message could already be a way of handling the error.
True.
So what is the error handling pattern? It consists of 3 steps. In the first one, you're going to try to do something, and then a bug or an error might pop up. When that does, you're going to try to catch that bug and then deal with it in any way that is correct in that situation. Either you ignore it and you work along with default inputs when that is applicable. Either you have a fallback procedure, or you just say, okay, I can't deal with this. I will terminate and I will send a notification somewhere saying that, or display an error message, yeah, this is not going to work. And then finally, you handle whatever is left. So if you don't have an error, you will just finish whatever it is that you're doing, and then maybe write to a history somewhere like, okay, this run was successful, or this application was not having any issues. If there was an error, then you are going to, after you handled it, it's gone, but then you want to make sure that someone knows about this, potentially as well. So that's the try, catch, and the finally pattern. And we have this both, or we have the option to do this both in Power Apps and in Power Automate. So how do we approach error handling? It starts, of course, with analytics. You want to see what is going on. And for Power Apps, you have the analytics in the admin center, where you can see how many times an app has been used. And then, of course, you can also see how many times problems popped up. You can see, for example, how many times a toast error was given. So that means that something really went wrong and it was made visible to the user. And so here, for example, you see that, let me try this. There we go. You see that the first application has a much higher error count than the other two. So probably this is something that you want to look into. You want to figure out why that app is always failing, and then probably you want to solve that so that you do handle that error in the future. How do you do this in the app? And I'm going to show this, but first I will go through it. That gives Tomasz some time to set it up. So you have an experimental feature in Power Apps, which is formula level error management. I do think it's still experimental. It's not in preview yet. Experimental means it's the step before preview, so it could still break. But still, it's already useful to know that it is there for the future and to play with already, where you get some functions that help you deal with errors. And if you don't turn this feature on, because you have to turn it on right now, it's not on by default. These functions will not do anything. They just won't be. They will be known, but they won't be executed. You have the trace function, which allows you to specifically display certain messages in the app monitor, which is also part of debugging, but can also still be useful in error handling. And then you can get information about the errors that were in your app by using the errors table, which is by default there. And then the try-catch pattern, which I am going to show in the app.
Okay. Ta-da.
Thank you. So we are going to the same app, to the other screen, and let me try to make this just a little bit bigger. So I will go to preview. So I have a very simple application where I can input a number, x, and then I have two labels or two functions that I'm executing. In the first one, I'm dividing 1 by x, and in the other one, I'm taking the square root of x. Now, of course, these functions don't work with text, and since I haven't put anything in, the default value of text input is there. When I put in 1, then 1 divided by 1 is still 1, and the square root of 1 is also still 1. So now I see that I have the right result. If I input 100, then 1 divided by 100 is 0.01, and the square root of 100 is 10. So both of this is correct. My functions are working correctly. Now, what I can also do is I can try to figure out if maybe this app will tell me what is 1 divided by 0. And if you, if basic mathematics tells us that this is non-existent or it's infinity, depending on how far along you are in the... In kindergarten, they teach us that it's, or in middle school, they teach us that it doesn't exist, but then later on you learn that it does exist. But so now I don't get a result with the 1 divided by x, because this is not known. And the square root of a negative number is also not natural, so it cannot be represented here. So it also tells me there was an error. So in those two labels where I'm calculating the results, I'm actually having two different approaches. Where for the first one, if I go to my first label, I just divide 1 by my text input. And so if this is an invalid result, I'm actually not going to do anything with that result. However, in the other one, where you see there was an error text right now, I do handle this error. So I'm using the if error function, which is basically going to execute or try to execute the first function that I'm providing, which is taking the square root of my input and then making a text out of that to display. If that is correct, it will just display the result of that function. If, however, an error occurs in that function, for example, when I try to take the square root of a negative number, it will show a message saying that there was an error. And so that is the first of our experimental functions, if error, which just allows you to have a fallback for when an error occurs. So that is the first one. What I also have is, because this is a function that you can use wherever, also in properties like the text or the display mode, for example, all those non-behavioral properties of your controls you can use this function in. But sometimes you want to do error handling when the user tries to take an action. Think, for example, when they try to patch to a data source and the input that they provide isn't right, then you want to also give them a message or either handle that error or whatever. And there, for that purpose, we have the behavior function, or we have also the if error, but then we can also use behavior functions in there. Let me go to preview again. So this button will just execute or calculate the square root as well, but then it will display a notification depending on the results of the square root. So if it's -1, it's not a valid input value, so it's giving me more information. But if I then put in 1 and I try the square root, then I get the notification that it was calculated correctly. Because sometimes you don't just want to show it in the label, but you also want to have an action tied to this. And so for that, we are using the same function, the if error, but then we are going to actually have two options. So I have, if this is an error, then I am going to show the response or show the notification that the square root was not calculated correctly, that it's not a valid input value. If I don't have an error, so in the else, then I do have my my notification that it was calculated correctly. So that is how we can incorporate these behavior formulas in there as well. What I also have is I have the app on error property, which is another useful one. As you might know, all those properties that start with on, they are the behavior properties. So this is a property that will fire when there is an error in my app that is not handled anywhere else. So if I do handle the error in another way, this shouldn't fire. And here I'm using the trace function to actually make sure that the results of this error will show up in the app monitor. So to show this, I am going to start a monitor session for this studio session. And this opens in a new tab, and it shows me that this is a studio session. And if I then go back to the app and I preview again, and I try to do the wrong thing again, and I press the button, and if I then go to my monitor session, then I will see that the trace has showed up, and the result of my trace function was success because it did execute the trace. But I can see then the result, which is basically the inputs that I provide in that trace function. I am building the message so that it clearly shows up in the app monitor where the error occurred and where it was first observed, and how many errors there were in total. So this gives me the opportunity to tailor my monitor result to whatever it is I'm trying to figure out, and that it can be very useful. Because you can also, of course, export this, which then means you can give it to someone else to maybe figure it out, for example. Did I want to show something else? I think that was, let me take a sneak peek. I minimized the wrong thing.
You have to minimize the whole.
No, so that was what I wanted to show. Any questions about that? Yes?
You mentioned that this is experimental feature.
Mm-hmm.
So I know when you're in a dev test prod, maybe it makes sense, but is it going to be like an issue if you deploy this to production? As in, if is error or something, does it cause any problem in the production, or is it more like in a dev test scenario, try to make sure your code is all right?
The thing with the experimental features is that Microsoft does not guarantee that it will.
GA, as in like this would be like GA after
I don't know if they've shared a timeline on that. Do you know? No, I don't know if they have shared a timeline on that. But experimental is basically that they don't guarantee that it is going to work and that it is going to continue to work like it is doing right now. It gives you the opportunity to experiment with it already, to try it out and to figure out how you can use it in your applications. But I wouldn't use it for production applications right now. We don't have an alternative at the moment to do error handling in Canvas apps, so that is why I'm sharing it already. But for production, it's not production ready right now. You can use it in your development process. I don't see an issue with that, but I wouldn't deploy an app with these experimental features, with it turned on, or with it implemented to production. I wouldn't do that. Okay.
All right, so we have like 10 minutes left, then I'll briefly go through error handling in Cloudflows, which is quite similar. Well, the first thing is about error handling that I want to add on top of what Carmen said, is that in Cloudflows, whenever a flow fails, it is usually business who is going to notify you that it failed because they are not they haven't received the expected results within the time they were waiting for them. And that's the worst feeling you could ever have, that your customer is asking you, hey, can you check if the flow failed? Because, well, mail didn't come within 5 minutes after I triggered it. So when speaking about error handling in Cloudflows and generally catching errors in Cloudflows, that one summary is called the flow monitor. It shows you all the flows that you're an owner of, not that are shared with you or that are in the environment, but you're an owner of, together with information whether the flow failed or not. So that's the first place where you can try and see which of your flows failed. And obviously, second place is to go into the specific flow and then its runs history to see which instances failed. And there you can, as EOS with the debugging, track down the reason of the failure and then either resubmit, fix the error, or just do something to make it work. Also, we have in Power Platform Admin Center information about the Cloudflows. There is the analytics, but it just shows like an overview of your environment, of how many flows you have, how many of them failed. Like there is this errors tab here, or a section, but it's not really useful when you really want to break down to the root cause of the problem, or to anyhow work with these errors. And also, you're getting this digest email once a couple of days with information that some of your flows failed, and then links to those flows, to those instances which failed. But still, all this information is like not proactive, it's like post-active. So you are being informed that something failed. But the goal is to inform yourself, to at least push information, hey, I failed, so you can react really fast. So what you can use is, again, a number of techniques. And here in Cloudflows, we as well have the try-catch pattern. So once you navigate to Cloudflows, to the templates, and you type the try-catch, you will have this template that, well, you'll see just in action. Basically, it uses two functionalities that are very important in both error handling and debugging. The first one is called the run after. So imagine that you have just like an action in your Cloudflow which might fail, and then depending on whether it failed or not, you're just doing a different logic. So then you are just using the parallel branch, and in one of the branches, you're executing the logic that would be run if the flow was just run successfully, if the action just was run successfully. And then in the second branch, you configure the action using the configure run after functionality, that it will be only executed if the previous action failed. So that if anything here in this scope failed, then this flow will simply send me a notification with details that that flow failed, and the link to the flow itself. Now, the second mechanism that we are using in error handling in Cloudflows are the scopes, because scope itself behaves like a mirror, like a container, so that whatever happens inside the scope level is going to be, whatever happens within the scope is going to be reflected on the scope level. So if any action fails inside scope, the whole scope is going to fail. This is why we are building this try-catch pattern using scopes. So then the catch scope is simply being only configured to run after the try-catch either failed or is skipped or is timed out. And then what I'm doing in the catch scope, I'm using a function that is called the results. And this expression got result that you have to provide the name of the scope or any other action which metadata you want to get, is then returning a JSON with information about every single action that is being executed within the scope, within the try scope. And then I'm as well filtering this returned array to leave only those which are having status either failed or timeout. And then for each such item, I'm just building myself like a string that is in the end being sent to my email as the information that this flow actually failed. So now, once I execute this flow, right, so this is just the flow. It shows the operation completed, although it failed. And I see that I have already received an email. So there is information that this flow failed. It failed in action, get newly created site ID. It failed because there was a bad request. And also it failed because what I can read in the details is that the client secret provided is expired. So then, again, once I hit the hyperlink that I as well created in this digest email, it simply navigates me straight to that instance that actually failed. Yes, it does show the flow runs successfully, but that is because the catch block doesn't have, in the end, an action terminate with the fail status. So this is how you can actually work with the error handling on the flow level. And then, well, you can't build like a logic that if a flow fails, then you maybe execute a different logic like very easily, because for that you might be willing to build some complex branching architecture or maybe child flow architecture that if specific logic failed here, then execute the different child flow. However, the goal is just catch these errors and be notified yourself so that, well, you won't be the last one to know. And the last thing we want to show you is how you can as well use Azure Application Insights, maybe this time without slides, just let's show the demos. Because the Application Insights is as well a very cool product in Azure that helps you to really create logs of your applications that are running, well, like Power Apps or Cloudflows. And it will as well deliver the business information, just the logs about everything that happened within these solutions. And again, you're able to log this information and build reports on top of them. So,
Yes, and here we have an advantage over Cloudflows because in Canvas apps you can, when you create an Azure Application Insight instance in Azure Application Insights, where else, you get an instrumentation key which you can paste in the app itself in the instrumentation key property. And what this does is it will send the logs of all of the sessions of the app actually playing, not in preview, but actually playing in the player, to Azure Application Insights, and then you can get information on that. So I have done this for this application, and earlier today I've done 3 sessions where I've just opened the app. So in Azure Application Insights, you can get more insights about sessions, and a session is basically when a user opens the app. Then you see that I have 3 sessions with X amounts of events, and then I can see the timeline of that session. So what I can see is the app was opened, and then the user navigated to error handling, back to debugging, back to error handling, and back and forward. So I haven't done anything extra except for pasting the instrumentation key in the app, and I already have an overview of what the users are doing in my application. So even if you do nothing else, this already provides you useful information. And you can also see error messages when things failed.
right, and then speaking about Cloudflows, it's unfortunately not that well integrated. I mean, it's not integrated at all. So you can't really use Application Insights without some coding. What I'm doing here to make it happen is that in the Cloudflows, no, where is that Cloudflow? Oh gosh.
You have too many tabs open.
Too many open. Right, so what I'm doing is I've written like a dedicated Azure function that is using Application Insights SDK. So I have two functions. One is to log event, the other one is used to log exception. And these functions are actually being called straight from the flow logic, using the HTTP request actions. And here I simply provide information that I want to store. So like with log event, just details about what action is being executed next. And when speaking about error handling, that's nearly the same logic as you saw before, where for each error that is found, this Cloudflow is simply recording a separate error back to application insights. So in this loop that is going through that filtered array of errors, it is just sending details about the error. Here again, the same information that I've sent to myself on email, but this time they are being stored in application insight. And well, actually, number of information that we are able to log in Flow is up to us. It's like how you build your own Azure functions that are using the SDK. For example, for exceptions, what I can read here, apart from this default information, I do have as well that details about well, the flow URL, the action name which failed, the status, the code, again, the information about why the action failed. So I am able to really log any information that I want from within the flow. Then speaking about just regular tracking of actions, then again, this is up to you. What I'm recording is just information about the action that is actually being executed, and just some descriptive information what is going to happen next. And then on top of this flow on this application insights, you're able as well to build Power BI reports that are going to deliver information to your business, how your flows, your applications are performing in the whole of your environment. I mean, in your organization, because that is actually environment independent. So you're able to do a lot. And with that, I know we're running out of time.
2 minutes over time.
And with that, we would like to thank you.
If you have any more questions, we will be here, tomorrow, but we will let Antti set up here so that we're not in the way anymore. And then if you have any more questions, just come up to us later today or tomorrow. Thank you once again, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you very much.